Let's talk some polls, Dan.
Buddy.
Let's reveal some polls. Your Oregon Ducks up 4 spots, all the way up to number 2 in the AP poll. Oregon, by the way, all the way up to number 1 in our Verballer Top 12 poll. We've also got Ole Miss up 9 in the AP poll, all the way up to number 4. Alabama, on the heels of their win against Georgia on the road 24-21, they are up 7 now, cracking the top 10 at number 10. In terms of the AP poll, some of the biggest losers: Penn State down 4 to number 7, Georgia down 7 to number 12, LSU down 9 to number 13, and Florida State down 10, all the way down to number 18. Notably, they are now ranked below Alabama. Okay. And USC has dropped entirely out after their loss to Illinois. They were previously at number 21. They're out entirely. Some other names here of teams that I think are just of interest in our universe. Virginia is now ranked number 24 after upsetting Florida State. They weren't even in the others receiving votes column last week.
Right.
Vandy, who we will talk about a little bit later in this episode, very quietly at number 16 after turning it on a little bit later than expected and rolling Utah State.
Yeah.
And among some of the other notables who benefited from losses of teams in front of them, Oklahoma up to number 5, Texas A&M up to number 6, Indiana up to number 8. These are all results of the AP poll. Any thoughts initially to those? We can get into our Verballer Top 12, which again remains the most accurate poll in all of college football polling, in just a minute. But how do we feel about what we saw on the AP side?
Totally internally split on who should be one between Ohio State and Oregon. It's hard to argue against what Ohio State did on the road, not allowing, I don't believe they allowed a touchdown at Washington, who had displayed a lot of offensive firepower early on in the season, and 0 touchdowns against the Ohio State defense. Not a ton of pop from the Ohio State offense, but efficient, right? They eventually take care of business after a slow start. What Oregon did at Penn State in that kind of environment and the way that they pulled that game out, I think just should have number 1 consideration, which when you're ranked number 2, it seems like there's number 1 consideration.
And look, like I said, in the Verballer poll, Oregon was number 1. Oregon was my number 1 pick.
Same.
And listen, Ohio State beating Texas in the manner that they did week 1,
that's
home. Great. At home.
Yep.
Going to Washington, putting on the display that they did, especially defensively, I think that's also something that we should commit to memory here.
Both have arguments. Yeah.
Absolutely, both have arguments. But Oregon going to Penn State and winning that game singularly might be the most impressive win we have seen so far in college football this season.
Sure.
So it's hard for me, given the fact that Oregon looked really good before that game, and then the way that they just went into State College and got that dub. For me, Oregon's won based on the body of work right now. Ohio State's a close second. Ohio State has been impressive in their own right, but I tend to agree a little bit more with the Verballer poll. My hunch is that there was a fair amount of second guessing where Oregon belongs, where Ohio State belongs, but consensus is that those are 1 and 2 in any order.
Also that the Texas win hasn't aged well through no fault of Ohio State's, but Texas has not looked especially strong and otherwise a top 5 type program at the moment. Miami has an opportunity this weekend to make a statement. They haven't played on the road yet, I don't believe.
No, this is their first away from home.
Going to a top 20 team as a favorite this week, coming off of a bye, they have the opportunity to lay claim to being in that. I mean, they're in this conversation by just being number 3 in the country, but they will have an opportunity to make a strong statement against Florida State to be in that conversation even further. Oklahoma at number 5, that's Oklahoma with John Mateer at number 5. What are they without John Mateer? Big old shrug. Who's to say? Yeah. But I don't think the assumption is that they are a top 5 team with Michael Hawkins, yes. And he has the chance to prove it and silence people like myself. But right now, that's a sort of assumption based on what we've seen from a different quarterback. LSU seems high with how incompetent during stretches they seem on offense. And the Clemson win hasn't aged as particularly impressive. Neither has the Florida win. And that's fine. LSU can only take care of business against the teams they're playing. I would have Texas lower. I don't think they've done anything since losing to Ohio State to establish themselves as looking like a top 10-ish team. I might have Vandy higher, than they are at 16, just because they've taken care of business against teams that they've been on the field against. Not crazy good teams that, like, South Carolina's flawed, Virginia Tech is flawed, obviously. They've already fired their coach, but Vandy looked strong in those games. I might have Mizzou a little bit higher. I might have BYU a little bit higher, though, as we mentioned, Colorado hasn't won a power conference game yet. And Texas Tech might be a little bit higher. That win against Utah, that fourth quarter has aged well, but there is a question about where they stand at quarterback, who's playing quarterback, how well that player will either continue to play or not necessarily continue to play. But Texas Tech has looked very strong. I don't mind having them even a little bit higher. What about you?
Yeah, one of the more interesting means of comparison here, if we're looking at both the AP poll and the Verballer Top 12, is Texas. And I feel like our Verballerhood has done a good job putting Texas where I feel Texas should be.
Right.
I don't think Texas has looked all that impressive. Now, for sure, it's a good team. And for sure, it is still early.
Totally.
They are 3-1. Their only loss is on the road against Ohio State. That's not a bad loss by any stretch of the imagination. But right now in the AP, Texas is 9. The Verballer poll has them outside the top 12 at number 14.
Yeah.
And I think that tracks where I've got Texas at as well. There are going to be ample opportunities here coming up for Texas the remainder of the season.
Of course.
To move up. And as I think our Verballers have done a really good job of, they will move teams around very quickly. It is not like, oh, you have to wait for teams in front of you to lose. Right. I think there is more of this mentality of flexibility, the limber poll, as you've put it time and again, with our own poll. So the way that ours broke down was Oregon 1, Ohio State 2, Miami 3, Ole Miss 4, Texas A&M all the way up to 6, Bama all the way up to 7, Penn State drops to 8, Oklahoma actually dropped 1 in our poll to 9.
Okay.
Which I think makes sense given the fact that, hey, they're going to be without John Mateer. Georgia down to 10, Texas Tech up at 11. I think that tracks with where they're at in the AP poll as well. And then Iowa State at number 12. But some teams outside of that top 12, notably Georgia Tech, actually dropped a spot. Texas at 14, I just talked about them. Vandy at 15. That's one spot up from where they're at in the AP poll. And then LSU down at 16 by virtue of their loss. Florida State at 17, Missouri at 18, Tennessee at 19, and if we want to go all the way down to 20, it'd be Michigan.
Yes.
I think our guys did a good job. Our guys and gals and everybody listening who voted in this, we opened it up to everybody who was a free Patreon member. I think they did a pretty good job ranking these teams accordingly. I might have some minor disputes with where teams are at, but I think the general vibe of where this thing is at tracks pretty well with how I feel.
Can I give you a couple of other teams that are not ranked, that are behaving like ranked teams?
Of course.
The best of USC, I think, is a top 25 team. It was not a great ending. We'll get there. Mississippi State. So Mississippi State at home beat what both of our polls have as a top 25 Arizona State team. Okay? And then held, again, just fact check me on this. Did they hold Tennessee to 2 offensive touchdowns in this game in regulation?
So. I believe so.
Okay, so it's 2 touchdowns, 2 field goals, and they get a touchdown in overtime to win. And then they had 2 defensive touchdowns, not on Mississippi State's defense, most certainly on the Mississippi State offense, but took Tennessee to the actual limit. We have them as a top 15, top 20 team, both of these polls.
Yep.
So I'm just saying, if Mississippi State is at 4-1, they're kind of playing and behaving like a top 25 team that I wouldn't hate to have. I mean, I assume they got votes in the AP poll, but I think it's worth maybe even more consideration as like somewhere between 20 and 25 in this moment. I have my doubts about how well they can sustain over the course of the season, given how much has changed and, what our questions might be about the depth and if they can sustain injuries. But with how they've performed, I think they're worth that conversation. Also, Memphis. Memphis at 5-0.
Yep.
They're able to somehow, some way take down a team who just fired their coach in Arkansas, but they've been winning comfortably, and I think they're very quietly a quality team to be considered in this top 25.
Yeah, they checked in at number 25, I guess tied for 24th.
Okay. In ours or AP?
In our Verballer poll.
Got it.
Yeah, in our Verballer poll, but Memphis otherwise was in the others receiving votes category. South Florida, Utah, Mississippi State, Memphis, and Louisville were the top 5 and others receiving votes.
Also,
The
I
next
don't
5
hate I don't hate having Michigan a little bit higher than where they are in the AP poll right now. They're at 20.
They're at 20, yeah.
I don't hate the way that they were able to run against Nebraska, which a lot of teams are going to be able to do that. But that's a tough environment. The offense for Nebraska is for sure improved. Bryce Underwood was able to run well. If they can get a passing game, they look like more like top 15 than top 20. I just think they're a team worth monitoring with perhaps an interesting ceiling.
Let us know your thoughts on the AP poll, on the Verballer poll.
Yes.
solidverbal@gmail.com or wherever you can leave a comment. We would like to get your input on who is too high, who is too low, who is just right.
Yep.
And what you're looking for the remainder of this season.